I know the virtual platform has really been interesting as far as utilization, Marissa. We typically, I can recall a Northside meeting that we had just a few years back where we had over 500 people participate, and then you go virtual and it can be difficult sometimes.
Absolutely, but we've actually been seeing a lot more participation as we've done this virtually, and like a number of other formats, whether it's like a task force, like working group, or some housing forums. We've seen more participation than we had in the past because it's just easier.
It's great.
Chris, I'm gonna have to invite y'all out to the newest ribbon cutting coming soon. You're on mute, can't hear you.
You got a new office space, right?
Mm-hmm. Right, actually, right next to Atlanta ARC, downtown. Mm-hmm.
ARC's building though is empty right now.
Yeah, thanks to COVID.
Hey, Chris, I like the background.
Thank you. Step it up a little bit.
There you go.
All right, I think we should get started. Let me on my video. There we are. How's everybody doing today? Thanks for joining us. I am Marissa Ghani with the Atlanta Regional Commission and the program manager for this project. So we are going to get started, and hopefully we'll have more people join us. And if they don't, they can always watch it. So let's get started. And Rachel, are we, okay, we are recording, I see. Okay, great. So please note, we are recording this meeting, and some feedback might be used in our reporting, but it will be anonymous. So it will just be part of our some larger conclusions, and probably lumped in together with some general comments. So today's agenda, I first want to point out that we do have a public input site. So you can go to this website listed over here and provide any other context, information, comments that you would like if you do not get a chance to either speak or share those comments within this meeting. So today's agenda will be do an introductory poll to see who's on this call, learn about why we're doing this study, some of the background data that we've collected already, and then some case studies and examples of other cities that are experiencing similar scenarios as Douglasville and how they are pursuing this housing issue. And then do a little bit more about participant survey about what our future of Douglasville housing could look like. And then hopefully we'll have our panel, which we have a great panelist. And throughout we'll be asking questions and trying to get some input from the audience about either the way you're answering a question or the information you're hearing. So please, please, please use your chat box, raise your hand, do whatever you can. If you have information that you'd like to share or questions that you'd like to ask, please do. We're hoping for some good participation today. So introduction poll, please let us know about you. In order to participate, you have to go on, well, you could do it either through a web browser or through phone, and you have to text the number 22333 to CD, and then what you're texting is the words CDEV 555. So the number is what you're texting to 22333, and the word is CDEV 555. I'm going to give everybody a second to do that. And we'll go into more introductory about the plan and who we are as we move forward. But first we wanted to know who's on the phone.
So can you give that, I got the number, but then give me the word.
Okay. It's CDEV 555.
And the numbers again at the top are what?
22333.
Thank you.
So is it correct that you can't see the screen at the moment? I don't know, the woman who just spoke, can you not see the screen? Because that will help me.
I
in
can see,
narrating.
sorry, I wasn't even looking at the screen.
Oh, okay, okay. I just wanted to know so I could ask, when I'm asking polling questions, if I needed to narrate that differently. Okay. So the first question, what role are you participating in this conversation today? And so we really just wanted to know if you're a community member, if you're working on these issues as an employee, or anybody else? There we go. All right. Good to know. We're gonna, if somebody, Rachel, can you, or Ryan, can you both, I see that there's some comments in there, but I'm just not able to get them as I'm moving this forward. Can you all make sure you're monitoring the chat, please? Okay. Let's
Yes, Marissa, we have one in the chat, one additional person said E, so an employee in the city of Douglasville.
Okay, so in one word, what does home mean to you? Mortgage. I love these, watching what people are writing as it goes. Stress. So I'm curious in any of these answers, if anybody wants to share more information about their answer or more context to their answer.
I'd like to take a hand at Marissa. I'm Amy McCoy, for those that don't know me, but I chose security because I look at security from a safety standpoint, but also from a financial position, and the freedom that can come with it when you change out the asset, whether you sell it. Hopefully that's giving you financial gain, to provide some financial security, but also the security from the elements, and giving you that peace. Your home is your castle, your rest away from the rest of the world, right?
Yep. Thank you for that. Anybody else? Okay, I'm gonna lock this.
Okay,
Go ahead.
I agree that home is a place of safety and peace.
Okay. Oh, let me do this first.
Now,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm a little challenged in what's going on here. So then, am I supposed to be looking at this particular screen? Because it took me to another screen.
I just changed the question. I apologize. I thought you had answered that question, so we had moved on to the next question.
Okay, this is the next question. Got it.
Yes, sorry about that. So do you rent or own your home? And again, this is just, it's anonymous. We're just learning about who's on the phone. And
How do we answer that?
A or B.
Oh, I got it. Okay, thanks. Right, but do you click?
You would text A or B to that number if you're already activated within the, if your text messaging is already activated to CDEV 555, or sorry, yes. If it's already activated, then you can put, you should just be able to type in A, B, or C. Have you already been responding to some of these answers? Or some of these questions, I apologize.
Okay. I don't know if that's, I guess that's a response. I don't know.
There you go. I think that worked. Okay, so the majority of the people on this phone own their home. Okay, we're gonna move on.
Oh,
Okay, oh, here we are. What is your current age? A, B, C, D, or E? Okay.
The true answer.
That's funny.
What?
Making sure we
Sam,
all.
Sam doesn't want to tell us his true his true age.
It's true age. Okay, so what do we see as the greatest housing concern in Douglasville? Either a lack of senior housing, too much rental, not enough options for young professionals, not enough executive level housing, a lack of opportunity to live and work in Douglasville, or housing affordability. And again, you respond by A, B, C, D, or E, or yeah, F.
I think the only thing I'm missing is all the above.
Oh, well, we're trying to find priorities as
Yeah.
the largest concern.
I guess that's where we put in the term greatest.
Greatest, yes. Oh, I see. It's not showing responses. There we go. All right. Are there more participants? Okay. So does anybody want to share some context to this, to their answer here? Who thinks that there's not enough options for young professionals and why?
It wasn't the one I chose. However, I do see the dire need for it. As a real estate professional, without going too much into, we're in the panel discussion, but there is, if we're looking at the new age buyers that are coming in, what is available, if we're looking at housing options where some people are considered wanting to live in a certain quality of home, but without having to get all the extra size large homes. Where is something that's feasible more from them and can be scaled financially, can balance out for being affordable. But there's just not much unless you're picking an older home and renovating and things of that sort. So I think we have a challenge here when we're trying to attract those type of professionals.
It's definitely scary as your first home to be renovating it and fixing it up.
Right.
when you don't even know how to run a home.
Exactly.
Does anybody else would like to share?
well, I'm not sure if Douglasville was designed in the beginning for young professionals.
Good point.
Mm-hmm.
I'm living in a neighborhood that I think is going to transition in about 5 to 10 years because everyone in my neighborhood is a senior citizen. So I could see that, once people start dying off or moving to assisted living, then the homes might be but they're older, so then it might require some renovation, but I think they might be affordable.
Yeah.
Well, to that point, I that's what I chose for lack of senior housing for those transitional neighborhoods. As someone like Marissa stated, your first home, the last thing you're thinking of is this full renovation project. And sometimes you find in senior homes, there are some deferred maintenance because of a set income level that there's not as much availability for those, when we came out of that housing crisis to be able to say, okay, I've got enough money saved up, I can now replace my roof, or now I can fix that leaky pipe. And as they transition into senior living communities, which we do have a lack of, or that assisted living facility, sometimes that responsibility of the home then relies on the heirs of the property if it's not properly sold off, or then it's sold at a low value to an investor who's really looking for their bottom line dollar. So is that a fair adjustment for the community? That has yet to be seen.
Okay. So what do we see as the greatest housing opportunity in Douglasville? And these align pretty well with the challenges. So accommodating senior housing, accommodating young professionals, accommodating young professionals through luxury rental, accommodating young professionals through for sale property, accommodating executive level housing, providing opportunities to live and work, and provide more housing that is affordable to the current population. So again, A through F. I'm curious for the person who chose live and work, the opportunity to live and work. Is it the live or is it the work that's the issue? Or is it just
Well,
combination?
For me personally, it was important to be somewhere where I was close with my work. I have that, I laugh and say it's the chronic illness and road rage because Atlanta has the ability to bring that out of you sometimes, depending on the traffic patterns. But, it being where you can be somewhere where you have live work experience puts value back, not only just in the home, but in the business community as well.
And how about others who responded that way?
I didn't respond that way, but I really don't see a lot of opportunity for work here in Douglasville. I just moved here 3 years ago from the DC area, and I see Douglasville as a bedroom community.
That is interesting because we've actually found with the data that that Douglasville actually has significantly more jobs than it does housing.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is it more service jobs?
It's a lot of manufacturing, warehouse jobs,
Okay.
retail.
Gotcha.
Well, welcome to Douglasville from the DC area.
Thank you. And when you were talking about traffic, hey, I dealt with that.
Yeah.
I'm in DC quite a bit throughout the year,
Yeah.
so I know that traffic is horrendous.
Yes.
Yeah. Is there anybody else who wanted to comment on the providing opportunity to live and work?
I would just say I responded to this one, and to me, I feel I think all of these are priorities, and
Yeah.
E is probably the best catch-all to all of them. And when we get to the panel, I'll talk more about this, but they kind of go hand in glove. The housing opportunities and some of the work opportunities, and so I think there's importance. We need executive housing. We need professional housing. And those also kind of help us in our ability to attract different types of companies to the community.
So I have a question. What is executive housing?
So some of those higher income housing that, some of the senior level executives would want to live
Oh,
in.
got you. Okay.
Some of the more expensive housing types. Okay, we're gonna move on. I believe that was my last question. Okay, well, thank you everybody for participating in those polls. We're gonna have more of those as we finish some information before the panel. So I hope that we can continue the good conversation. So this project is being done through the Atlanta Regional Commission through our Community Development Assistance Program, or CDAP as we like to call it. Again, I'm the project manager for this, and I represent ARC's team, and we have a number of other ARC staff that are working on it. We are also partnering with Georgia Conservancy on this, and then April has been a great partner at the city to help us move this project forward. So we, through the CDAP project, and just a little bit about it, we provide technical assistance to local governments. It's a competitive program that local governments apply to us. So Douglasville applied to our program to conduct a housing study. And really the main point that April will go into a little bit more is just understanding what's actually happening on the ground and getting more information, data, and quantitative and qualitative information about the housing issues within Douglasville and how those can connect, the solutions can connect to the goals and solutions that had already been set out in the previous planning. Because we know Douglasville is a big planning city, so we just want to figure out how do we accomplish that housing piece. So this is just taking it to the next level. And I'm going to pass it over to April. So go ahead.
Awesome. Okay. That's definitely a great introduction to Douglasville. Marissa, to be quite frank, we are a planning community. I think anyone on the call today would agree that Douglasville has been very busy these last 5 to really 8 years with adopting plans, beginning implementation, putting in for funding on the state level, as well as adopting those capital improvement plans to place in budgets as we continue moving forward. I too put live and work in that last survey question, because to Chris's point, it does go hand in hand, and those plans definitely play a role in allowing people to live and to work in the community and having that opportunity. So some of the plans that we have developed that directly relate to housing is going to be our Northside redevelopment plan, the downtown master plan and 10-year strategic plan, Fairburn Road corridor plan, and then the Dallas Highway LCI project. All 4 of those projects are pretty much active, and we are working on different projects within those different plans. I put a link in the chat for anyone who's interested in reading those plans. You know, some very light reading, not really, but it's good. It's good stuff, good stats, shows you the timeline, shows you the budget, and really gives you that information. So just to kick it off, the catalyst for us to go through the CDAP program with the ARC, as well as the Georgia Conservancy providing data, is really just an understanding of why we were getting various requests to the city regarding, you know, apartment homes, regarding townhomes. It was an influx. It wasn't just 1 or 2 applications, but multiple, 10 plus, if not in some cases, even senior housing. So we wanted to understand why the influx, what we could do to navigate to ensure that the different types of developments that were coming through the door to our planning commission, who makes a recommendation to mayor and council for those developments, we were being very intentional and using quantitative data, not just what made our heart feel good, as to what we would be allowing into the community, into serving our citizens. So this housing study aims, in our opinion, to address those concerns, to provide data for mayor and council, as well as our planning commission, and then also being able to just to simply provide decision-making opportunities for planning commission and mayor and council to make recommendations that are promoting smart growth and touching all of our populations, not just one specific population, but touching our seniors, touching anyone in our community that wants to be here. We want them to have an opportunity to live here. So we incorporated that within our steering committee. We've had various people that have sat on the steering committee who've helped us navigate these waters to come to the conclusion of what you'll hear today. And so I will pass it back to Marissa to start the understanding, I guess, of all the data.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, April. That was great. So we are going to have Ryan Schlom, who is a ARC partner is on the ARC team, and he is an expert in data. So he's going to help share what we're finding with the data for Douglasville. Go ahead, Ryan.
Right. Thank you, Marissa. Hi, I'm Ryan. I'm a researcher and planner, as Marissa just said, with ARC's Community Development Group. And I'm going to walk y'all through some of the data that we've compiled to help develop a richer understanding of what the numbers say that Douglasville's housing market looks like. And this is a cursory overview, really intended to add some numbers to your existing understanding of the city's housing market. And with that, I would like to add that if anyone has questions about what I'm presenting, feel free to drop them in the chat or save them until the end, and I'll answer after I wrap up. And if anyone is interested in reading a deeper analysis we've performed on the city's housing market, I'm happy to share that. So what I have today is really a quick intro with key takeaways from our research. And we'll start with our community profile key findings. So in our data analysis, we first looked at demographic and economic data to get a feel for the community's dynamics and makeup. And then we use those insights to inform what we learned about the city's housing market. So here's a few of the key findings from that community profile. We have that Douglasville's population growth rate is outpacing the region and the counties in the past decade, and that's expected to continue in the future. Douglasville is diversifying both in terms of race and age composition. And then despite a significant growth in population and jobs, Douglasville has a lower household income and slightly higher poverty rate when compared to the region. And we'll get into all that in just a second. Next slide, Marissa. Thank you. So Douglasville has shown pretty steady population growth throughout its history, with a rather explosive decade between 2000 and 2010. Since 2010, the city's growth rate has slowed down some, increasing by about 2,500 people or 7% between 2010 and 18. Moving forward, the population is predicted to grow at a slightly faster rate, at least through 2024. And the population growth rate appears to suggest that the city's housing market and population growth rate were slower to recover after the 2008 financial and housing collapse, but the growth rate is picking up again. Next slide, Marissa. When we compare the growth rate of Douglasville since 2010 with the county and the region, here's what we see. Douglasville has grown at a faster proportional rate since 2010, but I guess don't be fooled by the difference in height of the bars on the graph. Only 1 to 2% of change actually separates the city from the county and the region. But we do see that Douglasville's growth rate is slightly outpacing the regions. Moving into our racial composition, Douglasville is a changing city. Since 2010, the population has undergone significant realignment on its racial composition. In the last decade, there's been an attrition of white residents, causing the white population to decrease in proportion from about 40% of the population to about 30%. At the same time, there was a similar uptick in the city's Black population, which grew to comprise an additional 9% of the population. Black residents now make up about 2/3 of the city's population, and residents of other races than Black and white comprise about 5% of the city's population and didn't show much change over the last decade. And then at the bottom of the slide, you'll also notice that we've taken a look at ethnicity in Douglasville, and the city has a modest Hispanic population that increased from 5.1% in 2010 by nearly a full percent up to 5.9% in 2018. Next slide, Marissa. Here we have an age-sex population pyramid. What we see here is that Douglasville has a relatively young population with more than 90% of the population under the age of 65, which is to say that senior citizens comprise less than 10% of the city's population in 2018. And with an age-sex composition like Douglasville's, we're looking at a city with a fairly large workforce, especially among young professionals. However, we also see a lot of children, so a lot of families who are sending kids to schools. And then there's another bulge a little higher up on the graph, around the 45 to 50 age range. And with that, it becomes clear that there's also a significant workforce that is approaching retirement ages. And what we see from a population that looks like Douglasville's is that with this kind of age diversity, residents are going to be able to demand a wide range of housing types and sizes. So think a large variety of number of bedrooms in the Next slide, Marissa. Here we have the city's income distribution. Take a minute to look at the whole graph, but what's most important here is that we note where the bulk of the city's incomes are at. About 2/3 of all the households in Douglasville take home less than $75,000 per year, with almost half of them earning under $50,000 annually. The poverty level for the city is at about 13.5%, which, as we mentioned earlier, is slightly higher than the state and in the region, but that's a difference of less than 1%. It's important to note also here that there's a significant portion of the city's households that do earn above $100,000 per year. On the whole, from this community profile, you can go to the next slide, that's fine. What I want to emphasize here really is diversity. Douglasville is host to a lot of diversity on the lines of race, income, and age. And this has pretty important bearing on the city's housing demand. A population like this is going to be looking for a diverse housing stock in terms of size, price point, and structure type. And so that is what takes us into the current slide, which gives us a first look at Douglasville's housing market. Here we have a screenshot from ARC's housing strategy website, metroatlhousing.org. We can drop a link to that in the chat for anyone interested in browsing there. The screenshot shows city limits with the breakdown of housing submarkets that make up the city. The housing strategy identifies 10 submarkets, which are differentiated by tenure, which is who owns versus who rents, age of housing, cost of housing, and prevalent structure types like apartment buildings versus single-family homes. Douglasville is home to 4 of the 10 submarkets in the region, which are identified on the screen on the right-hand side. And the principal submarket in Douglasville is number 7, which is a suburban development pattern, meaning lots of single-family homes, characterized by lower and moderate-priced housing when compared to the region, and with the biggest increase in renters. Next, we have submarket 9, which is lower-cost rural areas, submarket 8, which is suburban neighborhoods with lower priced single family homes, and then submarket 6, which is more suburban neighborhoods with moderate to higher priced housing. Now we'll move on. Here we get a look at housing cost burden. So popular convention states that someone who pays more than 30% of their household income toward rent is housing cost burden, or they're paying more for their housing than their income should have to support. And reducing housing cost burden in the city is important because families who are cost burdened frequently have to make sacrifices in other areas like food security or vehicle ownership just to keep the roofs over their heads. And for the median income of Douglasville, which is about $53,000, the high end of an appropriate cost of housing is about $1,300 per month. And this chart indicates here that there's plenty of appropriate rental housing for folks who make the median income or more. However, for those making below median income, there's definitely a scarcity of options within city limits that are affordable for them. You might also notice on the right-hand side of this graph that there are higher levels of cost burden among homeowners at the higher income bands. And that's because people who buy houses often purchase at a price they anticipate growing into, which is to say that they'll buy at a price that technically cost burdens themselves, but they'll do it as an investment decision and a long-term decision. And then finally, the 3 statistics that I really want to drive home on this slide are on the right-hand side. 36% of all households in Douglasville are experiencing cost burden. 46% of all renters are cost burdened, and 4 in 5 households that earn less than $35,000 per year are cost burdened for their housing. Next slide. The next couple slides were prepared by our friends at Georgia Conservancy. So Nick, I want to invite you to hop in if I leave anything out, or if you have anything that you would like to add for clarification. First, here we have an illustration of housing type mismatch in Douglasville. On the left-hand side, you'll see a chart that shows the distribution of household size in Douglasville. So the darkest green slice there in the pie shows 1-person households, which comprise nearly 1/3 of all households in the city. And the second darkest shows 2-person households, and so on. On the right, we have a distribution of housing size by the number of bedrooms in Douglasville's housing units. And what we see here is that Douglasville has an undersupply of 1-bedroom units. While the second most common household size is a 1-person household, only 12% of all housing units have just 1 bedroom. And this pushes a lot of people living alone into housing units that that may be larger and therefore more expensive than they usually desire. And then we want to be careful before moving on to say that we aren't trying to prescribe that every housing unit should have 1 bedroom per person living there. However, research does show that this is most frequently the way that people arrange themselves in their homes when they have that choice. So this data suggests an undersupply of smaller units. Next slide, Marissa. We can approach this issue of housing mismatch a little differently too. On this slide, we compare Douglasville's housing stock by its cost to the number of households who are earning incomes appropriate for the cost of available housing. Those are the green and red bars respectively on the graph. And then we look at the difference between those bars to produce the purple bars on the graph. Where those purple bars are largest is where we see significant shortage or surplus in the housing stock. So if there's a surplus of appropriate housing units for some income band, the purple bar juts out to the right of 0. And if there's a shortage of appropriate housing units, we see the opposite, it juts out to the left. And that's what we're really interested in on this slide. As we can see here, the highest and lowest income brackets are experiencing a shortage of appropriate housing units, the greatest shortage occurring at the lowest income bracket, those families making less than $15,000 per year. However, we can see that there's also a lack of higher cost, usually more luxury or that executive level housing that we were talking about earlier. And those are what the households earning high incomes may seek out. And then this point takes me to our next slide. We have this income ladder here. And so what we see when we have an undersupply of housing units suitable for higher income brackets is this phenomenon that we call buying down the income ladder. And this is a cascading effect where if housing doesn't exist at all price points, higher income households looking to locate in Douglasville will acquire housing at lower price points, therefore buying down the income ladder. These households place additional demand on mid-priced housing, causing some middle income earning families to acquire lower cost housing. And this is the cascading effect. It places the greatest strain on households with the lowest incomes as it chips away at the low cost housing stock, leaving the fewest options for households with lowest incomes. And then the key takeaway from this slide is that Douglasville needs more housing at all price points from high cost to low cost housing. Next slide. This is the final slide that I have for you all. Now that we've hit the key takeaways from our analysis of demographics and the current housing market conditions, we can shift our perspective to the future a bit. Over the last year, ARC has been working with a consultant to produce a regional housing demand forecast, which has allowed us to estimate the annual demand over the next 5 years, so until 2025, for housing throughout the region. And here's what that demand forecast has said about Douglasville's projected housing demand. For Douglasville to meet its forecasted demand, it needs to add roughly 140 units to its housing stock per year. 1/3 of new rental demand in the city over the next 5 years will come from families seeking options that are affordable to household incomes below $50,000. So that's below the city's median income. And now the third and fourth points here were previously covered in those last 2 slides, but we see them come up again from the data in our housing forecast. And then with that, I have presented everything that I have, Marissa. I can take questions now if we have any, or we could save them for later.
Yeah, let's take some questions if anybody has any. I know that was a lot of information, and again, this recording will be on online, so you can go through the data yourself and check it out. And obviously, we are here for any questions, and this information will be in detail, if not more expanded, in our final report as we distribute information of this finding and of these studies. So, but if you have some questions right now, we're happy to take them. Anybody? Okay. And let me see. Nope, nothing in the chat. Okay. We are going to move on then. And our partners at Georgia Conservancy are going to take over and just talk about some case studies in Georgia and some similar communities that are experiencing housing issues similar to Douglasville. Catherine and Nick, please join us. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ryan, for that great lead in. It's going to tie so nicely to things we'll share, and then certainly the rest of the the meeting's agenda. And thank you also, Marissa. Good afternoon, I guess. We're officially afternoon. My name is Catherine Moore. I'm president of Georgia Conservancy and also a planner, and these issues about community needs, particular to housing and decisions we make about how we use our land and our communities to benefit people and the environment are very much core to my professional background and my personal passions. And I'm pleased to be able to work every day with Nick Johnson.
Hey everyone, my name is Nick Johnson and I'm a senior planner at the Georgia Conservancy, and I'll reciprocate and say I'm just fortunate to get to work with Catherine and learn a lot from her and her background. So we are part of this project thanks to ARC, and we have been providing some support with case studies and data regarding places that we've worked around the state, not just in the Atlanta region. And so we're going to take you through a couple of those examples.
So we'll try and be brief on this because I know we're a little bit over time, but that's for good reason. We had some very good discussion with the survey questions earlier, but we want to make sure there's plenty of time for the panel. But I think it's so important to plant these seeds of what else is going on in the state. What can I learn from peer communities? Great areas of creativity that we can mimic or make our own. What are some cautionary tales maybe? Others have forged a path that maybe we don't want to go down. And just generally knowing that it's not that anyone has done anything wrong to kind of have a problem or a challenge in your community. It's simply challenges, and we need to face them. And we're doing this the right way with data, with conversation, and with thoughtful planning. And one of the things we like to share with communities around the state is a reminder of just one set of reasons that spending time and investing in housing diversity and housing choice is important. It is fundamental. I think that's been made clear by the points already this morning. It is fundamental to economic stability, both of the community overall as well as individual households. And so it's helpful to just be reminded that when we are focusing on providing quality varied housing, and varied meaning to meet our citizens and our residents' needs, we're retaining folks that may have the ability and choice to go elsewhere to meet their needs, and we're attracting new folks, whoever those individuals and households may be. And then when we do that, we're providing a steady set of employees and consumers for local businesses that, again, are so much a part of a heart and soul and identity of a community. And we're attracting new businesses when we do that. And of course, we want to think about that kind of all under this tent of creating vibrant, livable, high quality of life communities. Nick.
Mm-hmm. Next slide, please. And so it's really great that Douglasville and the planning department and city council and mayor have invested in this project, because to have a strategy is to take the first step. And what we like to tell communities is that your housing strategy should not be stagnant. It should be ever evolving, because your communities are ever changing. So as Douglasville grows, it'll be important to kind of like see what works, reassess, replan, and provide new units and new resources as necessary. So just to reiterate that point, market forces, policy, planning and zoning, all of these things have an effect, and they work their way into this graphic that we produced for the city of Covington. And all of these folks influence different parts of the housing strategy. So by engaging with the whole team, you all are taking your first step. Just make sure once that step is done to keep reassessing and making sure that you're on the right track. So we're going to talk through a few examples, starting with some cautionary tales, and then make our way into some inspirations.
So we had the opportunity to work with the city of Milton several years ago, and they brought us in not directly because of housing, but actually because of urgent concern over lack of green space that was threatening their identity. They had some problems with some waterways in their watershed, environmental challenges. And as we dug into some of the environmental and conservation reasons they had brought us into the community, we realized that kind of a key domino in creating those challenges was the approach they had made to housing. So if any of you are familiar with Milton, you may think of it as just kind of the former North Fulton area that very much was farms, horse country, and not necessarily from decades ago, you know, kind of high dollar horse country originally. It was very much just the outskirts of Atlanta, and very, very modest, some very modest homes and so forth. It gained in popularity, which is always a good thing. Great, people love us. They want to be here. They like what we like about our community, and they're being drawn to it. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But what began to happen in Milton, and there were several kind of avenues, and I'll stick with just one for brevity for today, was that one at a time subdivisions, kind of dead end cul-de-sac subdivisions were being permitted, and they, you passing no judgment here, but just it became evident that they were eating away at what the original residents and the newcomers had loved, which was the pastoral landscape. So you see a little screenshot there of one of the roadways, and that's how the folks in Milton, when we went up to work with them specifically on green space, told us they loved about themselves. They liked the drive in their community. It felt pastoral. You would see wooded corridors, you'd see farm fences, you might see a pasture or hay or a farm, and that was changing a lot. And that was undercutting their identity and their comfort level. So, this is one where there was a planning void. There was an opportunity, as I wind down my points on Milton, there'd been an opportunity in the late 90s, early aughts, for that community to undertake a conservation plan approach to their community. And we don't know what the outcome would have been, of course. It may not have done all it would have been intended to do, because they chose not to take it. But I can tell you for certain, and this screenshot from kind of the aerial view is very stereotypical of Milton now. You see a lot of kind of winding subdivisions, and then you will see some kind of patchwork remnants of farms and agricultural fields. But there is a significant challenge in Milton now with sewer provision, with traffic, with affordability. Certainly a significant lack of housing diversity, and longtime residents have been and are increasingly being pushed out. And I just simply say that they're not bad folks in Milton, but I don't think that where they are now is where they intended to be if you had asked those residents in, I'm picking a year, 2000. Next slide, please. One other consideration is we just, have just pulled a handful of the communities.
Sorry, Catherine, sorry, I just wanted to reiterate the point that you were making. Was the point that because they did not plan the way that they wanted to grow, they grew in a haphazardly way, you're saying?
Yes, ma'am, that's exactly it. And thank you for just kind of succinctly making sure we summarize that point of this case study. That's exactly it. Paulding County is another community, certainly not that far at all from you all, where we've had the pleasure of working, and we did a land use study for this community in 2016. And you may be very familiar with Paulding, it being geographically closer, so I won't dwell on it too much. But another community that I don't think realized what was happening as it was happening until it had happened. And so the situation in Paulding, one of our participants mentioned feeling that Douglasville is a bedroom community. Not putting words in mouths, but I remember specifically from several public meetings that many folks felt that Paulding County is, or at least was in 2016, a bedroom community of Cobb and other places nearby. And so there was a very kind of welcoming and some may say lax approach to permitting subdivisions. And so as those began to happen, we saw in Paulding County across the landscape, different than Milton, but kind of the similar result is there were larger scale subdivisions that were being permitted pretty rapidly in Paulding County, and a significant, just to name a few, significant implications for Paulding County were to their schools, and not just the way that you may think, in that they had a lot more kids that they needed to build classrooms for, but because there wasn't a planning opportunity, and certainly a cohesive planning opportunity, just one line item from 2016 school budget was that the school was spending over $10 million a year on transportation. The schools weren't walkable, they weren't centered, as best possible to the students they were serving. And those busing costs of at that time, those dollars, over $10 million, weren't going to classroom teachers, books, technology, facilities maintenance, more schools. They were going to buses, bus maintenance, bus drivers, gas, etc., because the community had sprawled so greatly. Another takeaway is the traffic there in Paulding, and the tax base is a problem. The underlying tax digest is primarily of one type of home, and they are not, the government is not being provided enough income for the services that it's providing. And this all comes from a lack of planning, maybe at the right time, in matching infrastructure and people and housing with the coming demand. Next slide. Just a few more examples for you all.
Yes, indeed. So both of those examples illustrate that housing could have been a driver of some change that could have benefited the community, but because of the lack or the planning void or the permissive policies that were in place, it was not seen as a driver of those potential benefits. And so we're going to talk about a few communities that have really come to understand that housing drives community development and can support the things that you love, even if it seems not connected. And the first of these is
Nick,
Covington.
sorry. Nick, I just also wanted to contribute, like, the point that growth is going to happen in these communities and in Douglasville and throughout our entire region. We've seen the numbers exploding for numbers of years, a number of generations, and we are forecasted to continue that growth. So understanding ways that we can put the ideas that we are going to grow, and so how do we do that is into the plan, is the thought that
Exactly right. And I couldn't have said it better myself. And I think that that's something that Covington over the past decade has really come to understand about itself. And I would say that of the 5 case studies that we have for you, Covington is probably the most similar to Douglasville, despite the difference in population size. It's on the edge of Atlanta. It's struggling to maintain its sense of character and not autonomy, but independence and separateness and uniqueness. And they're really proud of several of the historic assets that they have in the city. And so they have come together with a lot of different partners, both governmental, quasi-governmental, and private or nonprofit, and kind of enacted a few pilot projects that have been really well received and embraced by the community. You're seeing some kind of missing middle housing, and the top image there, that's right on their square. And those are condos and apartments, a mix of own and rent. And those are really coveted. And then in the lower image, you're seeing the Covington Housing Authority's acquisition and renovation of some senior units that are within a stone's throw of some grocery stores and pharmacies and the hospital as well. So these kinds of interventions, and something that's not pictured here actually is a really interesting urban design mixed use neighborhood called Clark's Grove that has some of that higher end housing, but it's all a mix of types. You have townhomes next to cottage courts, next to condos. And so they're really investing in trying to figure out what works. And the way that they're doing this is through innovative programs and partnerships. So you have the Covington Housing Authority, which can sell and buy property and use it to deliver housing at subsidized rates for those folks who either don't have an income or have very low income. And then you also have private developers who are in the space looking to increase the supply of higher end units so that those income ladder pressures that Ryan was talking about are eased. So Covington is a great example, and we can point you to several change makers in that area if you're curious. Next slide, please. Another city that we've had the pleasure of working with is the city of LaGrange in Troup County, which is right near the Alabama state line. LaGrange is where Callaway, the Callaway family, has a lot of its historic properties and influence. And so the city of LaGrange has a really unique mix of people in it. It has old, legacy residents. It also has college students, young professionals who are looking to move there. So it can provide a nice analog for Douglasville as well. And where they have really shown as of late is in the area of policy and zoning. The planning department recently I think they've completed it now. I'm not sure what stage in the adoption process it is, but they have enacted a unified development ordinance, and they classify all of their new development by the type that it is. And you can see some isometric plan view images of 2 of the types. And they have different, it basically consolidates the entire thing and makes it a lot easier for a developer to do different kinds of housing in the community without extra red tape or pushback, because some of these are less common, communities have less experience delivering them, and zoning that does not match it. And so LaGrange is really forward thinking in that way, and they have started to see the benefits of that as well. Next slide, please.
And then a final one, and Ryan or Marissa, whoever's organizing slides, maybe you can take a minute and just scroll back through the examples we gave before we close out. I hope you all have noted, as we've looked at this, at these individual slides and case studies, the median household income point that's in the header of these different communities. And the point in including that is, again, that these are challenges across the state. Nick and I are involved with several other communities not included here and several other statewide organizations. And it is a challenge everywhere. And so it's a challenge even in wealthier communities, including Milton as well as Brunswick, which has, a somewhat low their median household income. So just that's something to note, that we can take lessons from all different peer communities and apply our own facts. This is one more I'm really excited to leave you with. Two big thoughts from me here. We worked with the city of Brunswick not too long ago with a really fantastic team, and we were looking at the communities immediately downtown, very, very poor communities alongside some wealthier communities. And what was lovely about this is the way that the city was looking at supporting its identity architecturally, as well as its walkability and its relative density for a variety of different income levels, and how they could still do that and create. I love the picture at the top. You've got a shotgun right there in the middle. Alongside one is a larger home, multi-bedroom, multi-bath, then a shotgun, and then a 2-story duplex that looks like it's just a large home. So taking, the vernacular there, the architecture, and mixing side by side different housing options. Ryan was talking to us in some of the data points earlier about just, and Nick's points as well, this mismatch between who we are and what the housing options are in terms of square footage, price, number of bedrooms, and so forth. But we can still do that and keep our identity as a community. And these things are all very walkable to downtown. And Brunswick has a couple of streets, one that's, maybe the quote unquote higher end streets with restaurants and rum distillery and a new brewery. And they've got one street over, it's just literally one block over, that you might call the working class street. And it's a hardware store, and go grab your shrimp po' boy and auto shops and things like that. So, different customers, different consumers, different price points with housing, all creating a very vibrant, diverse community that supports a variety of folks' needs. And the last point there, down there in the bottom, is using the facts from this study, just as we did in Brunswick, to say who really needs housing, where does it need to go, and how do we provide it. This is a 2-scale sketch of a closed, on a particular corridor. We found that in fact there wasn't much need for more single family or more large single family, and in fact we needed some very small, perhaps even shotgun or efficiency type of rental options, both for some more mature households in terms of age, including families, but also some college students, because the Coastal College of Georgia is there in Brunswick. And we identified an overabundance of commercial space downtown. So we began to look at underutilized or vacant properties and how they could either be redeveloped for new residential structures, or how we could take sound, physically sound, structurally sound commercial properties and buildings and turn them into housing. And this is an example. And there's some interest in doing this. I wish I had a now picture where it's actually been converted, but the sketch at the bottom is an old auto body shop. And these are efficiency units that can be put into the bays, the car bays for the former auto maintenance shop. And that parcel is one that's in a place where housing is needed. It is not earning any income for the property owner right now, certainly not much in the way of tax base for the city. And we, matched a property with a need, with an economic opportunity, as well as a housing need opportunity. And I'm hopeful very soon that this could be a converted project that we'll have fresh pictures of. But the big takeaway here is, who are you? What assets do you have, and how can you align a project to meet a community need from a household perspective and local government perspective? So a lot of interesting things there in Brunswick. And we'll wind down our presentation. Thank you, Marissa, for letting us share a few of our work examples across the state.
Thank you so much. Those were great. Does anybody have any questions about those?
And I've got one more slide. I apologize. You can pull up this backdrop, and Nick and I can speak to it. I neglected it, or it can be just a good backdrop that folks could read as we see if there are questions.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? Those were really great examples. I think that were very pertinent to this conversation that we're having here.
One thing I will add to the Brunswick example is that we didn't have them pictured, but as not as a consequence of our study, but kind of something that evolved at the same time, is that there was a handful of local developers who decided to give it a go, basically, and started to plan and deliver some small scale units like the ones that you saw in the top left in that picture. And we have been back to Brunswick, and families are living in them. And so I think one of the other takeaways is that it can be well-designed infill of small footprints can be contributed by market forces if you find the right mix of incentives and ways to encourage developers to think outside the box. And that includes policy, it includes zoning, it includes partnerships. So Brunswick is a really good example of where it's actually taken place, along with Covington and LaGrange, but as a market force instead of like a governmental project.
Any other questions that we could help answer?
All right, I'm gonna do some surveys. Actually, yeah, let's do some surveys, and let me see what time it is. So it's 12:30. We have another half an hour. Okay, so all these survey questions are online, and so I'm just gonna skip over this part actually and give our panel some time to talk. But they're all on our public input site, and so I think it'll be more valuable to hear from our wonderful panelists through this conversation. So I'm gonna actually pass it to April, and to start our panel. Nope, here you go, April.
No worries. So I'm just going to do a quick introduction to our awesome panelists that have agreed to let us pick their brains this afternoon. And then our friend at Georgia Conservancy, Miss Moore, will navigate some of those questions that I know we're all thinking about as we have received this information. Oh, there we go. I got muted for some odd reason. Next slide, Marissa. Our first panelist is Amy McCoy, who's a broker owner of My Hometown Realty Group. She's also very much involved community-wise. People know her. She comes to council meetings to speak about projects. She's just been a really great voice in the community, and really is the boots on the ground as far as housing, understanding our needs, our gaps, and what people have been wanting over the past few years. Next slide, Marissa. Chris Pumphrey is the former, I should say, president or CEO of the Douglas County Economic Development Authority, and now the partnership Elevate Douglas, which I'm sure, Chris, you can go into that a little bit further. But of course, Chris is, again, boots on the ground as it relates to development in Douglasville, Douglas County. We have a joint development authority for the city and county, just to be kind of a united front on the state level. And so he is our voice, known very well throughout the state as an advocate for economic development in our county. Next slide. Ms. Jefferson, Ebony Jefferson, is our code compliance manager for the city of Douglasville. While she is relatively new to the Douglasville community, she has definitely dove into understanding what all the citizens' wants and desires are, She has done a great job in, and I'm sure she'll go into this further, with understanding where code compliance was maybe 2-3 years ago in Douglasville, and has really elevated the definition of code compliance and relationship building in our community, and can speak to code compliance and what we're doing to try to elevate that service in our community. Next slide. And then finally, Mike Stevens, who is the Senior Vice President of Commercial Banking for Service First Bank. He, again, is another partner in our community, serves, I believe, as the chairman on the Douglas County Economic Development Authority Board of Directors, and big advocate for understanding how to elevate our community forward, whether it's through housing, whether it's through innovation, really anything and everything in between. Mr. Stevens seems to be able to provide a lot of input. I truly value his opinion when I develop projects. He's worked with the Development Authority, the Downtown Development Authority as well. So I'm excited to have all 4 of these panelists here to talk to us today. And I hope you will ask them any questions that you may have regarding how housing plays a role in their various purviews, and how we can kind of project ourselves forward, if you will. Next slide. There you go.
Well, thank you, April. If you don't mind, I've got a couple of questions. April and I were going to tag team the fun of chatting with everybody today. And Mr. Stevens, I'd actually like to start with you. We're going to like to circle back to some of the points that were made earlier about need, senior opportunity, economic development. But one thing that didn't get quite mentioned as much as I need to hear to learn more is some of the finances, and how household and individual finances play a role in impacting their housing options. And that may seem really fundamental, and we should all know that, but quite often folks don't. So Mr. Stevens, would you just give us a quick 101 and make sure that we're all clear about how loans affect the type or the amount of housing a family, whatever that family makeup is, can attain for themselves?
So sure, I'll be glad to try to weigh in on that subject, and appreciate being asked to be a part of this panel. So for clarity, most of my background's been in commercial lending, but of course we do touch on the residential aspect. I work with my clients as they go forward and look for mortgage loan opportunities. So to address your question, there is a lot of basic information that folks who are seeking housing have available to them. A lot of times it's educating them on where to go find that information at. I feel like the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau is a great source of information for folks who are looking to find out more about housing and how they go about doing that. But as far as loans, you've got a variety of programs available to you, whether that's a first-time buyer program, an affordable loan program, programs to the VA, which all of those oftentimes provide up to 100% financing for the purchase of a home, which can be advantageous for folks who may not have the ability to bring together that down payment they need. Sort of the industry standard, which is not really standard anymore, is it's great to have a 20% down payment when you go to buy a home, but that's not always possible today to accumulate that kind of cash, especially as home values are rising. So there are programs available for conventional financing with as little as 3% down, which still provide great opportunities for loans. Rates right now are historically low, so the money that people do have available for housing can go further because mortgage rates are so low, even for some of the affordable housing programs that are out there. So from those standpoints, I think that the first thing I'd say to folks is be sure you get as much education as you can about financing for the purchase of a home. There are sources out there. I know most banks, including our bank, has information and FAQs for folks on the public websites. When they look and research mortgage products and options, there is information out there, and there are links available to get more education about that. So right now, low rates, various programs available for folks to buy homes with as little as no money down are available out there. And of course, you can get into the myriad of programs, whether you're looking at a ARM loan, which has a fixed rate for a period of time before it adjusts, whether you look at a 30-year conventional rate, which means you pay the loan back over a 30-year amortization, or a 15-year amortization period. You just have a host of options out there, and it's best to get educated about what's going to work best for your particular circumstance.
Thank you for that. And obviously, Mr. Stevens, you know, that sometimes for households, that first home purchase, I'm speaking from experience, I'm not a banker, but that first home purchase really can make the difference, right, over your lifetime of what you're able then to do. So just another emphasis point of why having a diversity of options available for purchase that's within the means of individual households can lead to a lifetime of opportunity. And then, of course, you have that opportunity if you're fortunate to pass on some generational wealth for the next young ones, if that's in your life plans. So I'd like to use that as a bridge. Ms. McCoy, could you speak to a little bit about who are some of your clients that you're working with, and how does that access to finances or impact what they're able to do? And are you finding that you have the places to show and to offer to folks based on their need? What's been your experience? We've heard data, but what's been your personal experience?
So thank you very much, first and foremost, for allowing me to be a part of this panel. My experience of almost 17 years and being highly involved in multiple levels, I'm that research person as well. That's why I tend to get along with Chris Humphreys to be able to say, hey, this is data and where can we take our community in order to push it forward. So I tend to, with the national levels that I'm a part of, like the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, which is NARAB, as well as the National Association of Realtors. In respect to the National Association of Realtors, I actually served on the Federal Finance and Housing Policy Committee, where we were able to take some financing options like the VA loans to be able to give them opportunity for multiple certificate uses, eligibility usage, so that they can expand their financial wealth and growing, yet being able to use those certificates for the service that they've been able to do. We expanded FHA options for condos. We actually made some changes with USDA loans to make things more accessible for people to qualify. And so there are a lot of opportunities that are out there for you to be able to participate within these historic low interest rates. However, there is such a housing shortage. And it's not just Douglas County specific. And it's crazy. I was just looking online right now in Georgia, as we were just saying, we needed 140 new units. Douglasville right now has 160 homes available today. And that was like an hour ago. I can't tell you what happened in 5 minutes. But we have 290 that are under contract. Right now in the state of Georgia, we are now down to 8,770 homes available on the market in the entire state of Georgia. In retrospect, when we looked at the last financial crisis, we had over 140,000 homes on the market, which is why our foreclosure market, why values were going down. But because of supply and demand, it's very critical for us to try and get new developers to want to come out here and buy more, so that it lends to more affordable housing. But then it's also the type of smart build, because you don't need to have the 3,000 square foot home that you might, as in the market data research provided earlier, is that you find you do have a lot of single person households. I myself is one person living in a 4-bedroom house. Do I need all that space? No, which happens to be the common theme for a lot of people. But I've afforded myself a certain lifestyle and I want to maintain it. But do I need a house? Not necessarily. But there needs to be some more options available, especially for our seniors.
Thank you for that. And I love those data points of availability, and you can extrapolate based on turnover, kind of roughly how many months supply there are. So that kind of the data from realtors is so important and really is relatable and tangible. We can all imagine what that is. And of course, that's not touching, the rental market and the needs there. I'd like
just a quick point, Catherine, I'm sorry.
Yes,
just a quick point. Part of the National Association of Real Estate Brokers is we could come out with a CHIBA report. And one of the things we were able to determine from the 2019 era was that there is more than 3 million mortgage-ready millennials that actually make above $100,000 a year. So those are the people that we could be targeting to want to be able to live in the Douglas County area. If we just need to have the businesses, and Douglas County has been doing an amazing job attracting the type of businesses that can bring that in. We just need the housing supply. And clearly, Atlanta is in the top 10 of the 31 cities that have those mortgage-ready buyers available.
Thank you for that. And I'm going to move next to Ms. Jefferson, and I want to pick up that point about employers and employees with Mr. Pumphrey there next. But Ms. Jefferson, I think, you have, it's been alluded to, have a very interesting and I think community-based approach to code enforcement. Some of us hear code enforcement and we think, either we don't know what that is, and it sounds like it's engineering or something kind of really esoteric, or maybe we have a negative reaction to the phrase code enforcement. Can you talk to me about your work and how that helps stabilize communities?
Yes, thank you for having me. My background has been in city government for almost 21 years, right up until this point. So working in housing first afforded me the opportunity to be able to effectively communicate, but not only that, provide housing for those people that were underserved in underserved communities, and working with the housing authorities throughout several metro areas, including Atlanta, DeKalb County, the city of Decatur, and also Los Angeles County, from where I'm from. So coming to Douglasville for me was it was a good opportunity, but it was an opportunity for me to be able to use my ability and my skills and my experience to approach code enforcement in that where we will provide communities where those folks that were living there will be able to live in a safe and a healthy environment, beginning with where, the structure. So code enforcement for me has been a great thing because from the time that I got here in 2019, in 2018, the numbers were 580 cases. But when I came from 2019 up to date, we have had over 3,719 cases. And so we have been cleaning up the community. We've been cleaning up the businesses because we believe that you want to be proud of not only where you work, but also for those people that live in the community. And so it has given the opportunity for those people that are seeing their areas being cleaned up. We have had an increase in numbers of complaints where those persons would not complain about their landlord, because we do have owners that do not take care of their property. But there has been a stigma with renters. I don't think that renters are bad, because technically, well, sometimes your renters are better than the owners. So I think that we have to not have those titles. I believe community housing in terms of is how we live, and not whose name is on the deed. So I have been very successful in that area because I think that if we teach people how to clean up their property and tell them what we expect from them, then they don't have a problem doing it down the road.
Thank you for that. And for some of those folks, and I want to be clear that we've talked a lot the past almost hour about ownership versus rental. But for those individuals that might be in an ownership position, your important work of helping them understand maintenance furthers that investment for them, right?
Yes.
And then allows them or other heirs or folks involved in an ownership situation hold on to a financial asset. And of course, the community benefits are tremendous from that. But I just wanted to kind of make that point for folks that are watching.
Absolutely, because we do have a lot of older housing here, and we do have a lot of properties that have been passed down through the generations. The problem is that the properties have not been upkept, and not only that, the owners have not been held responsible for making sure that the properties are being kept up. So my role was primarily to make sure that they keep up the properties, or if not, then we have to look at another option for them, and that has been to demolish the house. Because you have to make sure that we don't have eyesores in the community, but we want to make sure that we have a safe environment, especially for children running around. So.
Absolutely. If things get to that point, nobody wins there. So thank you for your work, Ms. Jefferson.
Mr.
Pumphrey, and we hope to have time to circle back to others and have you all ask some questions. And please drop questions in the chat as well, and I'll get those to our panelists. But Mr. Pumphrey, we've had a through line here of community stability that can happen when we have options and we have services and awareness about what those options are. And can you help us understand what conversations are you having with employers about, who they want nearby their place of employment, and concerns they have maybe about the current inventory and the future inventory? Share some of that insight with us, please, sir.
Yeah, I'll be happy to and glad to join you all this afternoon. So, the employers are looking for a host of things, but obviously the number one priority for them is labor. And so they want to be in an environment where they know that they can, have the greatest chance of grasping the greatest amount of talent to work at their facility. And so for them, the importance lies in location, how close, what kind of proximity can you be, within that pool of talent so that you have the likelihood of getting them to locate there. And so with that, you're looking at the quality of life of the various areas that you're looking to locate. And so that means, you got to have good schools, you got to have, it's a safe community. And in those areas, you got to have a diverse, housing options there as well. And so not everyone is going to live in the community where that business is located, but as long as they're close enough to those folks, they have a greater chance. And this kind of goes back to my point I made earlier about, it's hand in glove. You need the proximity of diverse housing options so that the employers can get the highest and best talent. And when you don't have that, it limits your chances. And so, I'll just use last year as an example for us. We had 7 successful, we call those successful wins for companies, whether those were expansions or new locations to the community. That is resulting in 880 new jobs for Douglasville and Douglas County. And they're higher earning jobs at that. One company, their average salary is $100,000 a year, right? We want those people to live here in our community, which means we have to have housing options. Another company, their average salary is $20 a year, right? We want those people to have opportunities to live in our community. So it's very important that we have those options, which increases our chances to grow more in more jobs here in the community.
And Mr. Pumphrey, I'm not trying to speak to your industry for you or put words in your mouth, but then we also have the secondary and tertiary, restaurants, dry cleaning, bankers, insurance, all the other jobs and the people that we know that are part of our community this supports as well. And I want to watch time, and I know Marissa's going to need to close this out, but if I could do one, if anybody has thoughts, 60 seconds or less, and I would welcome all the panelists to jump in if you have thoughts. But again, we've tried to make sure that rental options were part of today's conversation. And I know I led us in conversation the past few minutes that spoke a lot to home ownership and attempting to build wealth and stabilize wealth as part of communities. But could anyone give us a thought of something that you see could advance multifamily and or just rental options in the community of any price point, but just rental and some low-hanging fruit or just an opportunity you would like this team to explore with April's leadership?
If you don't mind, if I could get on the dance floor first, real quick. So my biggest thing that I've been looking to encourage Douglas County to change is the minimum square footage of new construction. Obviously, we have the older homes that are here that are built less than the 14,000 square feet. That can accommodate for, the 1 to 2 bedroom housing style. If we were focusing more on quality of construction, that's where you'll be able to appeal to those young professionals and or executive style living. Again, that doesn't have to be the above 5 bedroom living space. And again, it doesn't have to be on a full acre. I live in the tributary, so I'm comfortable in my 1/10 of an acre. Douglas County can do a lot further for even the rental community if we were to inspire the residents to be able to build duplexes or up to quadruplexes. Those are government-backed insured loans that can help them with generational wealth and provide housing solutions for renters that can be affordable because it is based on that homeowner's, they're not looking at a bottom line number more than it is about someone helping on the mortgage, but also from generational housing. I love my mama. However, I'm okay if she's in the unit next to me versus in my house, It's just something to think about.
Thank you so much. Any other contributions on rental options? Seniors, young people, households in between? And then, yes, ma'am.
I would say this just really quickly, because a lot of communities are moving to the live to work community for the young professionals. They love to live where they work, but then you also have the being able to live and shop. Working in Brookhaven for a while, we had an area where you had the apartment community upstairs, but you also had the shopping underneath. So a lot of the young professionals like that environment because it's easier for them. They don't have to get in the car and drive. They like to walk everywhere. They like to go to the gym. They like to shop and go to the grocery store. So I think that's something that will be great as well.
Thank you, Ms. Jefferson. Mr. Stevens?
Thank you, Catherine. I'll just make 2 quick points. One thing, I don't think we can have this conversation without considering the other side of the coin as far as who's going to be coming out and doing the construction. We need to look at how the building community views the options here in this community. Secondly, I'll say some of my builders have really gotten very interested in building single family for rental. And they have been approached by funds that will back them to build a community with the entire intention of then selling that community to an equity fund, and then that becomes rental property. So that's a concept I think we're going to have to consider and adapt and make it work for our community. That could be just another option for housing in Douglas County, but that trend is coming.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that injection. We talked a little bit about innovation, and we're going to need to find that. Innovation it means different things in different places, just something different than what we did yesterday. And that's something we need to look for. Mr. Humphrey, any final thoughts? Then I'll hand it back to April, who may want to hand it back to Marissa.
I'm glad to see some of the housing, some of the options that are coming forward for multifamily developments. I think the thing that continues to come, however, is the request for LIHTC development, and I think it's always a question that I struggle to respond to developers, and I think just having a clear direction on what is allowable, what is not, going to be allowable, or even kind of just some thought within the housing strategy on the mix of LIHTC developments that we're willing to have in the community, because it doesn't seem to be ceasing as far as the requests come for that.
Thank you for that. And could you define LIHTC just for our audience and for the recording?
Yeah, I don't know exactly the acronym, but it basically is a tax credit of multifamily housing.
Yep, low income tax credit. So thank you. I wasn't trying to put you on the spot. Nobody wanted to hear from me. I'm just the moderator. Thank you all so much for participating. I know we'll have more questions of you, and we need to talk about next steps. Marissa's allowed us to go a few minutes over because this panel discussion was very important. I know you all will continue to be sought. Your thoughts will be sought after as we continue the next few months of work. And thank you for being here with us today. April?
I just want to again thank you to our panelists for taking the time out today. It's not an easy thing to step away from the office for an hour and a half and give us your time and your energy. So I very much appreciate it. And I will turn it over in the interest of time to Marissa Ghani.
Yes, thank you all. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry that we had less time than planned. Please, everybody, share this video out when we provide the link. And again, there's other ways of participating. I'm gonna I did want to go over just next steps really quickly to let everybody know. I won't pull up the PowerPoint because that's a pain, but January and February are really our community engagement pieces. We are starting after this meeting and getting other feedback on our website to develop the key recommendations. And we're going to have some working sessions with our study steering committee. And then we are planning to have the final housing report done sometime in May. So please visit publicinput.com/Douglasville housing to provide any more input that you'd like for us to consider as we create these recommendations. And hopefully you all learn some information in this call and are interested in what we have to say. So thank you everybody for attending and taking your time to spend with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marissa.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Go on.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks.